In this video, I survived 100 days of hardcore Minecraft on one chunk. I started off with absolutely nothing and ended up building one of my favorite bases to date. So sit back and relax, and let's get started. I started off on the surface of the chunk surrounded by an oak, birch, and spruce tree, along with some basic resources and a couple of soon-to-be meals. As per usual, I slammed my fist in the wood since November is over, and crafted a table along with sticks. The early game process here is similar to Skyblock, that being if you don't get a sapling back from these trees, you're done for. On top of that though, these animals also needed to not fall into the void and die as a final. I made an axe, crafted some fences, and immediately tried putting the animals in the pens along with getting a sapling back, which I replanted. However, moving fat juicy pieces of bovine is no simple task, but by midday I managed to save them. I also had myself to worry about here too, so I broke all the tall grass gathering seeds, which I then planted using a hoe made of wood. Wouldn't that just be a mannequin? I chopped down the spruce tree next, and while waiting for a sapling, I trapped my 2 pigs as well. And as night fell, I successfully saved all of these animals. Next up, I headed down until I reached stone, because these wooden tools are going to be the death of me one day. I made a stone pick and headed back down collecting some coal, which was actually exposed to the endless void, so that was kind of cool. I made a few torches to ensure mobs wouldn't spawn, and made a furnace along with more stone tools. Some people have actually beaten the game at this point, but not me. I'm only now getting stone tools. I began to dig down again until I heard water and lava. Unlike my 100 days video on the planet Earth, I actually did some research on this map before downloading it, so I knew what this chunk contained. So I guess you could say I dug to this cave rather than discovering it. It was a tiny cave. Well, kinda has to be. But it still held many valuable things, such as enough lava for a portal one day and water. I used both to create a cobblestone generator because, well, I don't know. I ended up using it quite a bit, so. Along with the 2 liquids, there was also iron, but I had to be quite careful on how I used it. Unlike stone, iron isn't easily renewable, at least for now. So for now, the only iron I could get was provided by the chunk. Therefore, creating things like iron swords and shovels and whatnot were out of the picture for now, especially armor. Once I returned to the surface, I chopped down a newly grown oak tree, and on day 1 I began a simple tree farm using the cobblestone I collected. I planted the only 4 saplings I had and headed back down. As I headed down, I heard the sound of mobs and I dug until I stumbled across some cobblestone. This chunk actually had a zombie spawner in it, which was thankfully already lit up, but there were still a couple of dudes who could kill me. I slowly but surely killed them, not wanting to risk rushing in just yet. Once I lit the rest of the small cave, I checked the dungeon chests. We got fire. And 3 iron. And a name tag. I feel like these are... Is this just regular loot? Fire is not a regular chest loot. Fire is not... There we go. Potatoes and melon seeds. And bones. Later on in the day, I started construction of a small farm thingy. Oh, and one more thing about this one chunk. Similar to Skyblock, again, you have to preserve your dirt. You only have a limited supply of it unless you get gravel. As the night dragged on, I planted stuff and things and used the bones from the dungeon chest to craft bone meal for use on the plants. While doing this, I was slowly breeding my animals as well. The cows and sheep especially, since they would both be very important down the line. Then, as the sun rose on day 2, tragedy struck. Not looking great. We have 3 left. I'm gonna break this one. Nope. It's just 1 left. Will it drop the sapling? Probably not. But let's see if it does. I'm gonna wait here until it despawns. No! No more spruce for the rest of the world. Oh well. That meant I was stuck with just oak and birch, which pained me. I nearly reset then and there, but I decided to take it as a challenge. Could I still make this place look amazing without the best wood in the game? As day 2 continued on, I expanded my tree farm, found more iron, chopped trees, and was slowly gathering materials. The early game of these types of challenges are always slow, so I knew that once I got past the slow bits, well, the rest of the bits would be faster or something. That's how that works, right? As night fell, I finally slept for the first time using the wool from these damn furry creatures. On day 3, I still couldn't do very much yet, but the one thing I could do was transform the zombie spawner into an XP farm. So I slowly dug out the area with my stone tools, and by sundown of day 4, it was ready. I finished the I made a zombie spawner. I just decided to make one. It's not going to be very good, but Here we go. On day 5, I created a task wall, something I do in all my 100 days videos, which you should definitely go watch, by the way. I have several videos on my channel similar to this one. I added a few tasks such as making a dark room mob spawner and an animal pen. I started off with a dark room spawner by adding a little platform off the side of my island which would one day be where the mobs fall. I also decided to not be an idiot and craft cobblestone walls in order to protect myself from accidentally slipping on a banana peel and falling hundreds of blocks to my death. On day 6, I spent some time on my cobblestone generator trying to get enough blocks to actually build the spawner, along with chilling at my other spawner to get some XP. I continued farming the cobblestone generator into day 7, and for some reason that's all I did other than run around chopping trees. The video gets more interesting, guys, I promise. I heard if you like this video right now, it gets better very soon, but if you don't, well... Also, subscribe while you're at it. We're almost at 30,000. Yes, subscribe button, please. It's right there. Click it. It wants you to click it. On day 8, I started construction of the dark room spawner. It's a very old Ethos Lab design that has always worked very well for me, and I used a mixture of wood and cobblestone to create this thing. Eventually, a thunderstorm began, so I wanted to sleep because if lightning struck my animals, that wouldn't be very cash money. Why did I write that? So I decided to go back down, which did not go as planned. Kinda thought I had placed ladders all the way up, but no, I'm dumb. Finally, on day 9, the spawner room was done, and finally I had a steady source of bones, which was the main reason why I made this so early. Bones on a world where you rely on things that take time to grow is, well, very convenient, to say the least. Oh boy, do I got something to tell you about day 10. Wow. And I mean, wow. I chopped trees all day. Literally. I rewatched the entire day. That's all I did. But on day 11, however, I actually built something. You know these animals, right? Well, I was getting sick and tired of their fat asses getting in the way of my fat ass, so I wanted to build them a pen so my fat ass could take up more space and peace. This pen wasn't anything special, but I did need to allow grass to spread here because if you didn't know, the only way for sheep to regrow their wool is to eat grass. Also, did you know if you place a 2-block wide path for the grass to spread along, it actually spreads quicker than a 1-block wide path? Pretty cool. Once the pens were done, I moved the animals over by holding wheat or carrots in my hand. Now, day 12 was spent at the cobblestone generator again. Why? Because my island looks like crap. I'm a YouTuber, in case you didn't know. And YouTubers need good thumbnails, in case you didn't know. So if my island looked like this the whole time, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be here, in case you didn't know. Cobblestone can be smelted into smooth stone, which looks alright on its own, but if you cook it once again, you get an even better looking block, which is actually called smooth stone. The first stone is no longer called smooth stone, it's just called stone. So I was getting plenty of cobblestone while I created charcoal in my furnaces above in order to smelt the large quantities of stone. This would be a common theme throughout this video, it's just smelting stone. I'm skipping day 13 because hotels do it. And also I accidentally went AFK and didn't pause, so that's why I skipped day 13. On day 14, I simply had to wait for my cobblestone to smelt. I'm honestly finding it very odd that I literally did nothing for so long and don't remember one bit of it. As night fell, I crafted an iron pickaxe. Why? Diamonds. This chunk had a lot more ores than usual to make up for the fact that it was only one chunk, and that included diamonds. So I went around the edges of the chunk collecting as much as I could see. I also decided to claim the next cave, which was completely full of mobs, shooting arrows with a bow made from the drops of the new darkroom spawner. After clearing out all the mobs, I collected all the stuff in the cave. On day 15, I continued mining diamonds, and by day 16, I returned home with 27 of them. But like the iron, I had to be a little bit careful about how I used these. As this was hardcore, armor was very tempting, but it also cost a lot of diamonds to make it. So instead, I crafted tools instead. Diamond armor would come at a later time using a different method. And finally, I began to reconstruct my world. I started off by removing this pond because the new plan was to actually lower the surface of this chunk a total of 3 blocks. As day 16 continued on, I began placing an outline of smooth stone slabs, and as the night fell, I began digging away the top 3 layers of my island. On day 17, I went back to the cave I had recently lit up and collected some deep slate, which I then used to make a perimeter around the chunk. I then lowered the surface by 1 more block to replace all this ugly ass stone with grass, so y'all can't say I haven't touched it. I also made a staircase of dirt from the animal farms to here in order for my grass to spread back down here. I fixed up the mob spawner a bit by making the killing area a platform you needed to climb a ladder to get to, and after sleeping, I began tearing down the old builds. On day 19, I began the process of making a circular road all the way around the chunk that would eventually branch off to other circles. I'm very fond of circles in Minecraft, which is a strange thing to say in a block game. As the sun began to rise before day 20, I added birch wood pathways on all 4 sides of the chunk, connecting the ring to the chunk because chunk. On day 20, I made a second ring a few blocks larger than the first one. Later on in the day, I grew a whole bunch of oak trees and collected the wood because I wanted the ring to be filled with oak wood. Normally, I would have used spruce, but... On day 21, I began placing the oak slabs along the road, and I have to say, despite oak not looking great, it actually works really well here with the smooth stone, which I kind of knew already after playing the game for 10 years. And of course, I had to make it somewhat safe by placing cobblestone walls around the ring, but I did so in a way that both conserved resources and also took up less space while still protecting me, because unlike fences, you can't fit through a diagonal gap of these blocks. Before the sun rose, I added a plus sign thingy on the main chunk as the center point of my future base. This was gonna look amazing. On day 22, I shoved more stone into my floating furnaces and headed back down to the cobblestone generator, which I upgraded a little bit to give me multiple blocks mined at a time. I couldn't pick up some of the stone, so I decided to spend 10 iron on 2 hoppers. I figured this was worth it because I could get stone much quicker this way, and it was something that would last the entire session. Pretty valid justification if you ask me, but on the other hand, why do I feel the need to justify myself to you? You haven't even subscribed yet. What are you doing? What am I doing? Why did I write this? With the hoppers in place, the cobblestone generator worked even better. I mined so much cobble that I actually used up an entire diamond pickaxe, so I crafted another one and went right back to the generator. I wanted to have enough cobble to last me for quite a while. On day 23, I began building the first of 4 massive circles that would hold my crops, trees, and livestock. I grew a bunch of birch trees this time in order to make a huge birch wood platform to build on. On day 24, I began placing the slabs. And let me tell you, this circle was much bigger than anticipated. It took many stacks of birch slabs in order to fill the entire thing. Once I finished though, I began building a smaller circle of dirt that would eventually become the home of all the fat asses, besides myself. I also began building a large half circle thing that would eventually be for the plants and trees. Next up was getting the grass to spread all the way over to the new animal pen. So once again, I created a 2-block wide path for the grass to spread across. I also decided to add the cobblestone walls all the way around the circle too. Later on that night, I lured all the woolly fat asses towards their new pen, which went surprisingly well. After I brought them all over, I decided to split this pen up into 3 sections for each animal. So of course, on day 26, I brought all the juicy bovine to their new home with their livestock brethren. Shortly after that, I brought the soon-to-be bacon slices as well. And finally, with all of the animals moved, I could tear down this eyesore of an animal pen, which was an amazing feeling, honestly. On day 27, I very slowly created a nether portal using the 10 lava sources near my cobblestone generator. Making this portal took way longer than it should have, but I didn't want to spend more iron on buckets, so I was running back and forth between the lava sources and the portal. I also collected enough obsidian from other random lava sources to have enough for an enchanting table eventually. During this time, I was also breeding the animals, making sure I always had enough if need be. You never know, you know? I crafted the enchanting table later that evening and prepared the area for it. I then finally lit the nether portal. Now, I will admit, I did not do research on the nether or the end, so I had no idea what to expect for the nether at all. Because of that, I made an effort to protect myself with some iron armor. I used the few iron veins that were visible from the sky and all the leftover iron I had to make it. After gathering my balls and my wits, I entered the hellish dimension expecting it to be regular nether, but it wasn't. Oh. Well damn, the nether's just one chunk as well. I used FreeCam to get a better look at this, and I think my reaction to this chunk says it all. Oh, what the fuck is this? So, I decided to try to get blaze rods. Obviously, I couldn't run into there swinging my sword and using the power of God to kill everything, because surely I'd die. But I actually found a clever way to kill these blazes. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this fortress thingy here has 3 layers, the top being blazes, the middle being magma cubes, and the bottom being wither skeletons, which is kind of OP for both me and them, if you ask me. The way I got my blaze rods was by digging out the ceiling above the wheezing sack of rods and then hitting them once, causing them to fly up to my height where I could then place blocks below them and kill them. This took several minutes, and I mean, just listen to how many sounds there are. Also, I caught fire many times. Making this armor was definitely a good choice. Eventually, I got enough rods to eventually go to the end, so I left. I still had plans for this dimension though, so this wouldn't be the last time I came here. When I returned, I crafted a brewing stand in order to brew weakness potions, but for that I needed spider eyes. My spawner was spider proof, so I had to get those in a different way. On day 29, I went deep into the chunk and dug out a wide room in order to have a basic spider farm. After finishing, I went back up to the surface, and when I came back down, there were spiders everywhere. Finally, I had my spider eye, but what I forgot to take into account was that fermented spider eyes take brown mushrooms, and to my knowledge, those don't exist on this world at all. So other than lots of cobblestone, this was kind of a big waste of time. Luckily, the solution to my problem just happened to be sitting in the mob farm already. A witch. Since I couldn't brew weakness potions, I had to use this witch. Witches have a 25% chance to splash you with weakness if you're close enough. So if you put a zombie villager next to a witch and got her to throw weakness at your face, you can cure zombie villagers. I did this exact same thing on my 100 Days of Skyblock. I separated the witch from the rest of the mobs, and now it was just a waiting game for a zombie villager. By sundown on day 30, I had a zombie villager in the spawner. Now it was time to cure him without dying. This was much easier said than done. That was because most of the time the witch used instant damage on top of poison, so if I got too low I could literally just die. Let's just say I made it to half a heart several times due to the poison. Eventually it got so annoying that I went to grab steak to heal quickly after getting poisoned. As time went on, I managed to set up an interesting thing made out of a cobblestone wall, which somehow made this process a lot easier since the zombie villager took the brunt of the potions. Finally, by early morning, I managed to begin curing this damn man. Wait, where? Yes! On day 31, I now had a villager man, which for now I just shoved into a boat. For the rest of that day, I used my new tree farm to just collect as much wood as I could for now, because I would need it for the next major project. On day 32, I began farming the warped fungi and crimson stems in the nether, because these were the only other wood types I had access to. This process took quite a while as well, because my plan was to use a different wood type for all 4 major circles, and those took up a lot of wood. So I needed a lot of wood. Near the end of day 33, I moved on from the warped wood to the crimson wood and got a crap ton of that as well. On day 35, I began the construction of the other 3 circles. The first one I built would be for villagers, the second one would be for my house, and the third was eventually gonna have a much larger tree farm. Day 37 is where I kind of messed up. Slightly. It depends. Basically, I placed all the wood down for the 4th and final circle, but then realized I used the wrong wood. That meant 2 of my islands had a birchwood floor. There was no way I was going to replace it though, so yeah. I started off day 38 by adding a sugarcane section to my farm island because I had completely forgotten to do that. Sugarcane's kind of important if you want to enchant your stuff. I had the leather in the form of juicy bovine, but I don't have the paper. Man, what is wrong with me? On day 39, I finished off adding cobblestone walls around each circle. I didn't want there to be any chance of my dumbass falling off. Also, in order to enchant stuff, you need lapis lazuli, so after spotting some exposed lapis, I mined to it and got some. Also, I think I was getting bored of waiting for the sugarcane. Bro, I'm literally jumping on the bed like a kid. I'm 20 years old. Throughout day 40, I chopped oak trees over and over again. I was preparing for something big, and the more blocks I had to make it, the better. On day 41, I captured another witch since the first one despawned, and immediately after that, I finally crafted 45 books, which meant I now had enough stuff to make a max enchanting table. It's a funny thing when you just suddenly have enough materials to do what you've been trying to do for a long time. But I'm struggling with this crafting. It's a funny thing when you can suddenly, you know, just create the max enchanting table, finally. Let's see what we get on some of these things. Fortune 2, kind of meh, kind of meh, kind of meh, kind of meh, No, level 1 enchantments are a thing. Grindstone, that's something we should get. After I made the grindstone, I finally began enchanting, and let me tell you, this went much better than 100 Days on planet Earth. Fortune. Nice! While doing this, I was also waiting for another zombie villager. On day 42, I moved my current villager over to where the villagers would eventually go, and I did a trick where I used signs and carpets to make sure the villager wouldn't leave. This works because mobs don't see signs or carpets as full blocks, so they'll assume it's just a giant hole and won't try to cross it. But of course, as a player, I at least have a few brain cells. Just a few though. I lost the majority of them doing my duo 1 block 100 days with Welcome In. It took literally all day, but I finally got my second zombie villager. But then I realized I actually didn't have the golden apple. I ended up going down into the chunk to find enough gold, praying that they wouldn't despawn. Thankfully they didn't, and after crafting the golden apple, I used this weird cobblestone setup thing again to get the witch to use weakness. There it is. And I managed to begin curing my second villager, which was huge because once I had 2 villagers, I could get as many as I wanted. Once Mans was cured, which took like no time at all for some reason, I boated the Mans over to the other Mans so they could be together and make baby Mans. I don't think that's how it works in real life, but then again, I'm currently living on a giant floating slab of blocks in the middle of an endless void, eating delicious T-bone steaks, so realism was kind of gone as soon as this challenge started. Speaking of getting started, it was time to get started on the next major project. I won't say what it is yet because I'm gonna let you guess. It won't be that hard, I promise. I started off by heading to the nether and bridging out a small amount to build a platform. I added some cobblestone walls to make sure my dumbass doesn't— you know what, I've made this joke already. Now, I took all the wood I had gathered a few days ago and built up a decent amount. From there, I built out long lines of wood, making sure they were upside down half slabs so that nothing could spawn on them. Then I began the outline of a circle, and similar to my first circle in the overworld, I built a second outline several blocks further out. If you haven't figured out what I'm doing yet, you know what? You're not dumb. Maybe you don't play Minecraft. I'd be surprised if you're still watching this if that's the case, but I'll go ahead and say it's a gold farm. A very large but basic gold farm. On day 45, I began to fill the 2 rings in, which took lots of wood as usual, and I am thanking my brain for not being dumb and actually taking the time to collect all the wood I needed. Now with these platforms done, it was time to test the farm. One problem I faced with this, however, was that the fortress layers actually greatly decreased the amount of zombified piglins spawning in the farm. There are a few ways to fix this, but none that needed to be done just yet, as they were all extremely dangerous. After returning to the overworld, I enchanted an infinity book, so that's kinda cool. Also, I have no idea when it happened, but my 2 villagers, after some time, decided to have a child. Oh yeah, remember how I said I wanted to spawn-proof the fortress rooms, but it was too dangerous to do so? Yeah, well, apparently I tried. I have no idea what I was thinking, but at least I had the sense to dig down into the room below where there weren't wheezing sacks of rods that could set me on fire. So I managed to save myself and begin to spawn-proof the middle floor at least. After securing that floor and making it back up safely, I decided to use another method to spawn-proof the blaze room. I went to the place where I had previously farmed my blaze rods and began digging it out. Then, I placed lava and let it spread. And once it spread, I removed all the blocks under it so it would fall down and flood the room, leaving no blocks for anything to spawn on. Once I was done that, I left the 3rd floor behind as I heard wither skeletons and knew that I would absolutely die if I tried to spawn-proof that floor right now. But the gold farm now worked even better with only 1 floor taking spawn rates. And then this happened. Thankfully, I was prepared for it. I think I'm gonna die when I go through this portal. I just gotta run. Hey! Oh god, why? Why? Oh my god, bro. With all these levels, I managed to get a looting 3 book, so that's cool. Now, with all these books, I needed an anvil, which I did not have enough iron for. Luckily for me, this chunk contains one of those massive iron veins. You know, the ones with raw iron blocks and stuff. Only problem is it's super deep and likely packed with plenty of mobs, but I knew it was worth it. So I made my way down, first discovering a cool tiny lush cave that I never use. Then, I carefully dug towards the sound of many mobs. My game plan was to slowly break in without being spotted and place torches. That way I could leave and come back to a completely empty cave after they all despawn. After placing a couple torches, I went to the surface and stacked up high enough so that every mob in that cave that could despawn would despawn. Finally, the cave was all mine for the taking, mining. I saved a raw iron block for last, and when I mined it, this happened. So 2 things happened here. 1, I lost 9 iron to lava because for some reason this hole exists. But 2, this hole leads to the end portal, which despite my research and free cam, I didn't know was actually here. I also decided to be smart and take a bucket of lava and 1 dripstone back up with me to the surface so that I could duplicate my lava source just in case. Thankfully, despite losing the raw iron block, I still gathered enough iron for an anvil. So after smelting all the iron in my furnaces, I made a cauldron. This wasn't a mistake. I still had some iron left over from before, so I made the lava duplication thingy now rather than later. While the rest of it was smelting, I made a small farm in the village section and placed a bunch more beds so that the village population would grow on its own. Why did I do so much on day 48? On day 49, I crafted the anvil and finally used some of the books I was so excited about. So then I decided to do the next task on the pillars. Wait, did I mention these yet? No, I didn't, huh? Yeah, so as a replacement for the task wall, I added 4 task pillars instead. I can't believe I forgot to mention these. The next major task was a storage room, which ended up actually being my main house. I decided to build in a very medieval style because of my lack of spruce wood and my abundance of wool. But even though this building looks like it was made in 2012 on Mine Z or something, it actually turned out very nicely. On day 53, I began work on the inside, adding a crimson wood ceiling that honestly worked really well in here somehow. It sort of took away from the whole 2012 building style issue, which was a good thing for me. On top of that, I added an oak ceiling on the highest part of the house. I chose this side of the house to be for my chests and some other crafting stuff, and the other side was used for furnaces and my enchanting table, so I could finally move it away from the main chunk where it looked super ugly. And then I began to finally sort my items. I did this by simply breaking my floating chests and bringing whatever I could into my new storage room. If an item didn't have a home, it would get one. By sundown, all my chests were now properly sorted, and with that, the storage room task was done. On day 55, I returned to the gold farm. I protected my portal with fence gates and then trapped a piglin that spawned on my chunk in order to trade with them. Also, these warped fungus leaf thingies were causing some pigmen to live by dropping down on them, so I decided to get rid of them, which was made so much easier by the fact that I had enchanted your mom a few days ago, so I could hoe these fungi down pretty quickly. On day 56, I continued using the gold farm until I discovered a small problem. Zombie pigmen were spawning on my staircase down the chunk and piling up in there. The way I handled this again was using lava. I went to the overworld, grabbed a bucket of lava that had been made from the dripstone, and poured it down the staircase. It sort of solved the problem, at least for now. This farm was never going to be 100% efficient as long as this chunk existed, and removing thousands of blocks of netherrack didn't sound like too much fun. As day 57 rolled around, I removed the warped fungus leaf thingies too. My main goal with all this gold farm usage, by the way, was gravel. Like I said, dirt is limited unless you have gravel, which you can use to duplicate your dirt. So I spent some time duplicating my dirt supply for future use. Later on in the day, I returned to the nether to begin building a small extension of my chunk. Basically, it was just a different area to farm those nether trees, but I don't actually think I used it. And on day 58, I began something I had been procrastinating on for days now, the village section. The reason I procrastinated for so long was because I genuinely had no idea how to build it. Eventually, I do get around to rebuilding whatever I make here, which surprised me, because normally I'm a lazy piece of lard. I also made use of the fact that iron golems were spawning in to protect the villagers by killing them to get more iron. This weird deep slate warped wood structure was actually an infinite villager breeder design I used in almost all my worlds, but it was by far the ugliest one I've ever made. I had no idea what I was doing, guys. This is highly embarrassing to admit, especially since I'm known to be a pretty decent builder. As day 60 rolled around, I quote-unquote finished the breeder, and on day 61 I began finally using these villagers. I had managed to craft a blast furnace using the iron dropped by the golems, and with this you can turn a villager into an armorer. I used one of the villagers that had been cured for better deals. While doing this, I also put a roof above the heads of all my loyal citizens. Because my demands for emeralds began to rise, I replaced my current tree farm with more farmland so that I could trade potatoes and carrots with all my farmers. I moved the tree farm over to the 4th circle, which currently wasn't being used for anything. On day 62, I went back to the gold farm for some reason, and it was here that I realized my new warped tree farm thingy was actually just another area of my chunk that took up the spawn rates of my gold farm, along with the less minor consequence of having dozens of angry zombie pigmen that were only being held back by a fence gate. I partially fixed this by adding trapdoors so their dumbasses would walk off. I ended up moving the trapdoors to the island itself so that they wouldn't even have a chance to get near me, and this seemed to do the trick. Why am I spending so long here? I literally don't remember. By this point, I had 4 piglins trapped, so trading was coming along very nicely with them. Finally, after trading with these men some more, which did get me several stacks of gravel, which is always good, I headed back to my villagers and began working towards a maxed out armorer. And after no time at all, I finally got the item I had been working towards ever since I got my first villager, the diamond armor trade. It took me 64 days to get full diamond, but finally I had diamond armor, and the best part about this was from the gold farm. Oh, that's why I went to the gold farm. When you buy diamond armor from villagers, it's normally enchanted, but the enchantments are normally terrible, but also disenchantable using a grindstone. I went to the gold farm to get some levels so I could max out my diamond armor instantly. I finally understand the method to my own madness. Throughout the rest of that day, I worked on enchanting it with the levels the gold farm had provided. By sundown, I had nearly maxed out my diamond armor completely. Holy crap. Remind me to never write scripts like this again. This is painful. Please subscribe for my pain. And speaking of pain, I decided that I should probably just go and beat the game now. After preparing by getting tons of blocks, fireworks, and of course the Eyes of Ender, I went down to the portal and lit that thing up. After gathering my balls, wits, and blocks, I jumped through. I was expecting the end to be like the overworld in the Nether, you know, a single chunk, but for some reason the end was completely normal. I don't know if this made me disappointed or happy. I didn't know if this would make the dragon kill easier or harder, so I instantly purled over to the mainland island and began shooting down the pillars. I promise I can aim, my bow durability says so. Anyway, you all know how this goes. After collecting the dragon egg, I went to the end gateway thingy that spawned, which of course was also over the void just to give me anxiety. I used trapdoors to crawl through and I materialized in a strange new place. After collecting more ender pearls, I disabled shaders and increased my render distance to look for an end city, and luckily for me there was one right over there. I carefully made my way over there, making sure I didn't fall into the void, and I targeted the ship first because I wanted wings. I did take a risk and use an ender pearl to get to the ship once I was close enough. Look guys, I'm cool, I took a risk! To be honest, I could probably get twice as much done in a 100-day session if I wasn't so damn cautious all the time. Although I'd probably have to restart several times too. I think this way's better. Anyway, I finally got my wings and took off into the sky. Well, really just to get to the other parts of the city, but I wanted to sound dramatic. From then on until day 66, I continued raiding nearby end cities and getting a lot more loot in the form of diamonds, which is great, and of course everything else. I flew into a random end gateway portal and returned back to my lowly single chunk. Next up was the incredibly fun task of sorting all this loot into chests. It was really fun, guys. On day 67, I added a loft to the storage room that would actually act as my bedroom. For 66 nights I had slept under the stars, but now I'll be sleeping under a ceiling. Putting it that way makes it seem like sleeping under the stars sounds better. Trust me, it wasn't. It was cold. Sometimes it rained. This is Minecraft. Once I finished the loft, I placed my bed and brought back the ultimate flex, which is something I do with the dragon egg every time I get it. It's supposed to be a modern lamp. Doesn't really fit in here, but you know, it still looks cool. For the rest of that day, I chopped more trees and, well, yeah. On day 68, I spent time at my village trying to get a mending villager. Why does this always take so long for me? Oh wait, I could just make it seem really short because I'm a YouTuber. Let's try that again. So on day 68, I got a mending villager instantly. Look at me go. For some reason, it took me another 20 minutes after unlocking the tree to put it on my wings. But finally, on day 69, I maxed out my wings. I was now officially in the end game. After lots of tree chopping on day 69 as well, I started off day 70 with a new project. Redesigning the villager breeder to make it look better than this ugly ass deep slate stuff. So that's what I did using all the wood I had collected. And after finishing this build on day 72, I thought it looked really good and I had plans to redesign this entire island soon. But for now, it was time for the next task on the task pillars, the Wither. Now that I had diamond armor and wings, getting to the Wither section of the fortress was actually survivable. Despite the spawner, getting the skulls still took quite a long time. I even lowered the floor by a block to give the skeletons more room to spawn in. But by early day 73, I had all three, and after returning home to get 4 soul sand, I went to the end once again to fight the Wither. Combo, strafe, L, strafe, L, L, strafe. Comboed, L, strafe. Well, that literally took no time at all. Only problem was, similar to my 100 days on planet Earth, I was poor. I didn't have the materials to make the beacon actually beam or shine or whatever. I knew that it was time to stop procrastinating and use my villagers properly for something other than trading. Back in the day, iron golem farms used to be huge behemoths up in the sky. But nowadays, they take no more than a shulker of different easily obtainable materials. The most difficult part of this farm was going to be getting the 6 villagers and 1 zombie into the farm itself. Normally I'd just use water elevators for this, but I don't have kelp, so I had to resort to making a staircase and hoping the villagers wouldn't fall off while climbing up. By now, the breeder had made plenty of spare villagers, so I just linked my staircase to that. On the morning of day 75, I began moving the villagers up slowly using pathfinding. You can move villagers pretty much anywhere if they don't have a job. And by sundown, I had the first 3 out of 6 in the first chamber? I don't know what to call the things that they're sitting in right now. On day 76, I began with the last 3. The first one nearly committed several times, but he eventually made it. and after that, the next two made it up perfectly fine. Now all that was left was the zombie. On my 100 days of Skyblock, I had to use zombies that were holding items in this farm, but in this world, I actually had a name tag from the zombie spawner dungeon way back when on day 3 or something, so all I had to do was get a normal zombie and name it. Before I did that though, I had to turn the front beds around so some of the villagers could actually sleep. The first bed I turned around wasn't that bad, as the water just flowed straight down into the void, but the second bed, well, I'll just show you. Oh! I don't know if this literally could have gone any worse with the water. I guess I could have gone in there. I tried to save this villager, I really did. But despite my best efforts, he drowned anyways. And I'm almost 100% sure he was one of the ones I cured. Typical Magicov moment. Anyway, after all that happened, I created a small netherrack platform for mobs to spawn on to try to get a zombie. I got one almost instantly, but I also got some other mobs too which I had to kill. I eventually managed to get the zombie where he was supposed to be with a small water elevator, and on day 77, I finally named him. But before I let the zombie and the villagers make eye contact, I had to build the killing chamber down below, which I began making after mining down all the netherrack staircases and platforms. I didn't put too much effort into this killing chamber, but once it was done, the farm was ready to turn on. I am always scared to do this. Releasing the zombie and starting the farm. As soon as the zombie makes eye contact with the villagers, the farm starts, so I gotta be ready to go once that happens. So I'm just gonna put blocks here, and it's begun. Instantly. There it goes. Nice. Just like that. Now that I had a steady source of iron, I spent all of day 78 sitting at the farm collecting the iron until I had enough to replace the netherrack here with hoppers. After I got enough, I began gathering resources for the next major project, the Dimension Islands. Inspired by Welcomin', I wanted to have 4 miniature biome islands at the corners of my base. I collected a bunch of materials from the nether chunk, and then went and mined a crap ton of endstone as well. On day 79, I demolished an end city, because I actually wanted to rebuild one on one of the Dimension Islands. But before I made these islands, I figured it was about time to turn my village circle into an actual village. I started off by using your mom on a whole bunch of coarse dirt to turn them into regular dirt, because I wanted the entire floor, ground, I wanted the village circle to be covered in grass. That's what I'm trying to say. I did this all the way into day 81, where I began to rebuild this place finally. I started off by removing the cobblestone walls to replace them with smooth stone, because I was just placing the dirt on top of the wood anyways. I of course replaced the stone walls on top of the new smooth stone as well. I may not be in danger of the void anymore, but these damn villagers sure are, and I don't want them to fall. I started placing the dirt on day 82, beginning near the breeder, and then, realizing I didn't have anywhere near as much dirt as I thought I had, I headed back to the gold farm to get more gravel. I spent over 2 days in there. Finally, I had enough dirt to fill the place in completely, which was a huge upgrade. Oh, never mind. Apparently I still needed more gold. Be right back. During the night of day 85, I returned and placed more dirt. I knew from experience getting all this dirt would take forever, but I did not expect it to take this long. I had to return to the gold farm one more time, but finally by sundown of day 87, I had replaced all the dirt required to fill in the circle, and after hoeing it all, the grass slowly began to spread across it. The plan was, instead of having the villagers trapped in little trading hall-like prisons, I just wanted to have them roam around the village like, well, normal villagers. Once I felt like I had enough materials, I began laying out the foundations of these tiny homes, and by midnight of the next day, I had completely finished the village by adding pathways and farms, bone mealing the grass, and planting trees. This transformation turned this section of my base from my least favorite into my most favorite. I normally never completely rebuild something like this, so the fact that this turned out so well makes me think that I should do it more often. On day 90, I made a quick improvement to my cobblestone generator by adding more hoppers and allowing for 3 blocks to form at a time to keep up with my pickaxe's mining speed. And after getting half an inventory of cobblestone, I began smelting it down into smooth stone. I had previously collected all the materials for the Dimension Islands, but they needed platforms to sit on, you know? As the sun began to rise, I finally put my beacon to use by powering it up right in the center of the chunk. Well, almost center. You know what? Even numbers suck. Changed my mind. Even though it wasn't a maxed out beacon, maybe by day 100 it will be one. Who knows? Well, I do. But you don't. I'm slowly losing my mind. Speaking of the beacon, actually, on day 91 I added 2 more layers to the beacon. I don't think it's a far shot to guess that I maxed it out by the end, but it's still a secret or something like that. You'll never know. You probably will. Now it's time to actually create the biome islands though. Like I said, the plan was to have 4 of them, and I chose decent locations and decent sizes for all 4. I started off by outlining where each one would go, and on day 92 I started with the Nether Waste / Soul Valley / Warped Forest Island. Since each island was so small, detail was key, and I'll be honest, I loved the way the first island turned out. I had no plan going into this, but it turned out great. Next up, I worked on the second Nether Island, which would be diagonally across from this one. This one would hold the Basalt Delta, Nether Waste again, and the Crimson Forest. I added a small Nether Fortress to this island as well to account for most of the detail, and I love this island even more than the first one. The third island was the first of the 2 end islands, and this one was inspired by Welcoming completely, as I made a miniature version of the dragon fight, with end rods as the end crystals and blackstone stairs and walls as the bedrock fountain. This one was kind of lackluster, but hey, so was the end, so it works. Finally, the 4th and final island was for the outer end island. On this one, I rebuilt the section of the end city that I tore down almost completely to scale, and to top it all off, I added some coarse plants that would slowly grow around the structure. By day 95, everything was done. As day 95 continued on, I decided to quickly check my nether chunk for something. I knew the overworld chunk had surprises like end portals and ores, but did the nether chunk have netherite? Well, if it did, I sadly never found it. By day 96, my base was actually starting to look really cool, but there was one more thing that was bothering me, so I decided to handle it in the best way possible. We are gonna light this place on fire. Probably a terrible idea. Let's do it. Ah! All the mobs will eventually fall down there anyway. I want to watch this, but from a safe distance. Look at them. Look at them. There they go. This is a really funny sight, actually. Bro. Once all the wood had burnt, I mined away the rest of the spawner until I couldn't even remember where it used to be. Next up, I now had enough Goofy Goober token. I now had enough iron blocks to max out the beacon. Yeah, you probably guessed that I'd fail. Proved you wrong. I'm kidding, of course, you probably forgot all about it. But yeah, I maxed out the beacon. Now, I'll admit it, the next thing I did was really dumb, so I'll shorten it down for you. I spent the last few days completing the 4th circle by using double carpets to fill in the tree farm circle. Why is this dumb, you may ask? Because I thought that by using carpets I'd actually save on wool. I thought this right until I finished, but then I did basic math in my head. It takes 2 wool to make 3 carpets, but I was using 2 carpets per block. So in reality, I was actually using 4 wool for every 3 double carpet I placed, making this take much longer than it should have, mainly just me waiting for sheep to regrow their wool. Anyways, for the rest of my time, I took one last look at everything I had made. This world turned out incredible, but this wasn't the last discovery I made. If you watched my 100 Days of Skyblock series, you may remember I mentioned something about biome abuse. As I was flying around with my Elytra, I checked F3 and noticed that this world had biomes too, meaning it had a world seed. This meant that it would act in the exact same way Skyblock did, that being if you go out far enough and load new chunks, those new chunks would no longer be void. It would actually be a fully fledged Minecraft world. As soon as I noticed that the world had other biomes, the coolest thing I had ever seen in vanilla Minecraft happened. What the shit happened here? I don't know why I just said howdy. What the hell? Good to know that this is a thing. Whoa! Turns out the new biome blending kind of breaks here, and it looked incredible. I of course wasn't allowed to take anything from here, as I could only take what the chunk provided, but nonetheless I still flew around the entire perimeter to see what it looked like. By the time I made it back home, the sun had rose on day 100. I didn't even get to sleep. I took one last final look at my world, said my goodbyes, and ended the video.